Okay, well, welcome for this wonderful introduction. Welcome for the invitation to a special kind of thank you to Marco, to Raffaele and Ginevra, where you are, because you made, oh, here we go. You made this trip absolutely beautiful here in Milano. So I'm Koen Pauwels. I'm currently in the US, but as you can see from my name and my accent in English, I'm actually from Belgium. And we just beat the US in the World Cup. Yay! So I was very happy with the summary of Marco of the Italian situation, because of course you're part of the world, and I hear the same kind of concerns and opportunities come back in the US, in the rest of Europe, in other parts. So my main bread and butter is measurement. So I was very touched by the attention to measurement. Besides my academic world, I spent about 5 years in Amazon Ads on retail media in New York. So I'm happy to talk about that one too. And then influencer marketing, I'm doing fantastic research in Polymie with Professor Lucio Lamberti and Gloria there. And so I'm very happy that UPA is also having these priorities in mind. But for today, they asked me to talk about AI and marketing. So maybe a question to the room. So just put your hand up. Who here has heard that AI is really going to transform marketing? Okay. Okay. And now the next question is completely anonymous. I promise not to hold this against you. Who here has actually transformed marketing in their organization with AI? Here we go. Yes, you know, I was asking for good examples. And there are some wonderful examples also in Italy of organizations that have succeeded in this one. But there is indeed a gap. There's a gap between the promise and the faulty practice, as I say, of AI in marketing. And so for the last 3 years, I've really been involved in helping companies to get better ROI, experiment smarter, and to learn something about what works and doesn't work with AI. And this goes both in your relationship with customers, but also in your relationship with your employees, because they're also concerned. Yes, they love new tools to do their job better and satisfy customers more, but they're also concerned to lose their jobs, to find out that maybe what they provide is AI slop and is not satisfying customers. So there's a lot of anxiety around AI and marketing. So let me put a few numbers up, right? So the first number is from McKinsey, and I know that I'm dressed like McKinsey, but don't worry, I don't represent the company. When they survey marketers, they find out that 88% use AI as at least one function. So that's a majority. But only 23% have really begun scaling agentic AI. And only 27% of marketers really feel that they're on top of the trends in AI in general. So that's a really big gap. And one of the problems with a hype like this is always separating the signal from the noise. So which things should you pay attention to, and which things maybe you can wait out? Let your competitor make the mistakes. Get the customer backlash and learn about them. And so in the last 3 years, in the different parts of the world, we see examples of companies really doing this well and companies struggling more. And in both, there's a lesson. So my LinkedIn profile say that I help people make better decisions or avoid worse decisions. So some debunking of myths that we have seen, and I put to the right some citations from CMOs, Chief Marketing Officers, that have talked to that one. So number one, of course, is that AI will completely replace the marketer. So 3 weeks ago, I was with the American Advertisers Association in Boston, and we had Sharon Reed there, the Chief Media Officer of General Motors, and she's like, well, I hope that you're over that story. AI won't replace you, because it can't. But so the fear is not that AI will replace you. The fear is that you will use AI, or your people will use AI. They will make mistakes, and when the next brand audit or legal audit comes up, you will have no recourse to explain, because you're the one responsible, right? They have to use a human accountable to explain these mistakes. There's some others. So Raja has a wonderful book. He used to be the CMO of MasterCard. And he basically says there's a lot of stuff going in that is like theater, but it's like people on the football field dropping down whenever they're touched. Commedia dell'arte, right? But it's not really what's going on the field and what you can use. The second one is that you're just going to have much more content. So if you used to be able to produce, let's say, 3 good versions of your television ads, or you have an influencer, a celebrity in Italy, and you could use her for a few minutes to tape something, you can now multiply that with 100, with 1,000, very, very efficiently. So let's just flood the possible consumers with all new personalized messages at the right time, and you have an AI version of that influencer talking to you, personalized. Well, we find out that consumers don't really care much about your brand, at least most of them, and they're not very welcoming of being bombarded with messages. And you see some reactants to things that are obviously helped by AI. So one of the people that I interviewed in my podcast CMO Talk USA is Teresa Barreira from Portugal originally. And so she's the CMO of Publicis Sapient. And she has changed her entire marketing organization because of AI. So they stopped doing lots of stuff. One of the things she stopped doing is writing first briefs. So Gen AI is producing all the first briefs they say to ad agencies. But she's saying, look, AI is providing the floor. So AI can help you, just like blockchain did a few years ago, of making very typical mistakes. So the ad agency proposes something to you, AI checks if it's consistent with your brand positioning, if it's offensive to some people in some towns in Italy. But AI will not help you to produce the really memorable ads, the things that people remember 10, 20 years from now. It's the humans that provide the ceiling. And so AI can do wonderful things, and we'll get to that in a moment, but we still need to invest in humans. And that's one of my key slogans. And then finally, AI-generated content, does it really do as well as humans do? There has been some interesting research that says if you train AI on your previous ads, and you put them out there, and it's not obviously they're produced by AI, by the way, that's a whole other topic, then they tend to perform rather well, because they're trained on great data, your own ads. But they don't typically move the needle. So they're great to stay top of mind, to keep mental availability. So AI does very well what is your typical mediocre ads, but it doesn't tend to produce the really big ones. And I think that's absolutely key. I'll talk in a moment about the AI authenticity paradox, which I gave a lecture about. So where does AI deliver very well? Number one, anything related to execution, optimization. So a few weeks ago, I was in Zurich for YouTube. They got a whole bunch of managers in the room, and they had me and some other people talk about the big picture, about search going to AI. And in the afternoon, they had ways that, Google products, of course, could help you execute that. And it was absolutely marvelous what it can do. So it can really help you execute things that you couldn't do before. Yeah, very much fantasy things with celebrities. And you saw the kind of AI that gets produced in your social media feed, right? And what's interesting, so I did some research recently about whether consumers actually like that or not. And it's very consistent across countries. So if you could have produced the ad without AI, people are upset that you did it with AI, right? So if it's showing beautiful landscapes with 3 celebrities hugging each other, right? Let's say Messi and Ronaldo, and you could have done it without AI, they're like, why didn't you do the work for me and actually did it without it? But if it's so fantastic that AI is the only way to do it, then they're actually pretty happy with it. So even consumers don't want AI to replace all humans. They really want to have that one. Campaign reporting and summaries. Remember how long we had to wait in the old days before our campaign ended and we got the KPIs and the metrics and what we could do better? Online made that a lot faster, and AI is going to be even faster in in real time saying, okay, this ad is not performing too well, this is how we can replace that. And so it is just much faster in terms of message timing and personalization. Foodora, the food service, is a case in point. So you typically want the food service when you're hungry, and not when you're not hungry. And so they used AI to really optimize and seeing which signals customers are sending online to increase conversion and reduce the unsubscribe rates that they have. One thing I was asked to talk about is search by AI. So I personally do not think that large language models would replace all the searches. It really depends what you like to do. If you like to search for something and then you like to browse, you like to explore, you don't mind going to 8 to 10 websites to decide for yourself what you want, you're still going to search, I think. But of course, if you want a quick, good enough answer, large language models are absolutely fantastic. They're being increasingly used, and brands that optimize search engines are typically not very well placed to optimize for LLM answers. My example, I'm a long distance runner, that's why I'm in running shoes, and the only reason I'm not wearing Italian shoes for you right now. And so when we look at running shoes online, we basically see Brooks coming up a lot. And Brooks you probably won't know unless you're a runner. It's a Boston-based brand, and they have a strong focus and a strong community, but they come up more often in running shoes answers of LLM than Nike, which is the big brand equity brand. And so we were like, why is this happening? And so it turns out, and I'll put this on the next slide here we go, that large language models really care about your attributes and what you say about your attributes and what people say about it. And so Brooks has a very tight-knit community. They have been nurturing that for decades, and they really position on just one or two key points. And it's constantly repeated by their customers, by running coaches, and so forth. Whereas Nike is a lot more diffuse, right? There's several reasons. The second reason is that LLMs do not care about the symbolic value of your brand at all, unless customers really say about it in reviews. So the wonderful driver that UPA got to me from the airport till here, thank you for that one right away, he asked me a question. He's like, Koen, you're in marketing, and I see Lidl, the supermarket, selling running shoes for just 16 euros. And I get that one. But then they're being resold on eBay for 700 euros. How, which kind of people pay 700 euros for a Lidl sneaker? And then I'm like, you're like a large language model. You assume rationality, and you don't, really kind of take the symbolic value into account. So that means for your brand, if you have been focusing on symbolic value quite a lot, then there's some retooling that you can do to come up more as a good answer to a user question to an LLM. Because that's what large language models do, right? The user asks questions and has purposes, and the LLM learns about you over time. And it says, well, is Brooks or Nike a good answer to the specific user question? And in this case, very often Brooks wins out. So they care about retrieval optimization, engagement, and so forth. And so they care a lot about consistency. So you say something on your site about your brand, and users also say that. And any inconsistency is dangerous to not come up there. So this is my second slide about that. The two main ways you have to control this is owned media to the left and then earned media to the right. So in your own media, your website, your dedicated resellers, make sure that you have these attributes, that you're consistent in frequently asked questions and things like that. So anything that the LLM, searching through your site can pick out on and say, look, they're really good in this kind of product attributes, this kind of material source, right? Because people and LLM look at you as the expert on what is this suit made of, what are the ingredients, where does it come from. Whereas they look at consumers, on the right side, the earned media about things like, does it fit me? Should I buy a size too much or too little? Because this brand tends to underestimate or overestimate sizes. And so in your earned media, get your fans to really talk about you, and try to nudge them towards talking about things that are consistent with the stuff you say on your own media. So these things come out as very strong driver of this one. Do consumers like you using AI? Back in the day, November 2022, when ChatGPT was launched, as a professor, we were all over that with the students. But you saw, because of the novelty aspect, that consumers actually liked you experimenting with AI. Also in advertising and communication. So 60% of people said in 2023, oh, we like use of AI, and now only 26% say it. So when it's obvious or when you disclose something is made by AI, even if it's objectively better, consumers have a huge reactions against that. There is some interesting nuances. I want to point out one, since Lucio and Gloria are in the room. So we talked about influencers, the creator economy. Have you ever asked yourself what's the difference between an influencer and a creator? So our research basically figured out from consumers, right, that some influencers focus a lot on themselves. You see that in their post. It's all about me or my family or my kids, and I typically show my face or my full body. Other people we call content creators focus much more on the products. So, there's technology ones, there's travel ones, and even within the same category. So, for instance, travel influencers, some of them always have very hot shot about how gorgeous they are, and then you also see the background in Santorini or in Milano. Other travel influencers only show the beautiful landscapes. And so their posts are focused on something else, right? And so we actually learned that consumers, followers of these influencers, have a very different engagement with AI. So if you're seller-focused, we call that a seller-journaler. You basically have a journal about your life. People are very upset when you use AI because they believe they have a personal relationship with you. And so using of AI basically blocks that. If you're a content creator, if you're not used to talk a lot about your personal life, if your focus is on the technology product or the landscapes and traveling, people are much more okay with you using AI because they don't feel that you're this, close personal friend. They use you for your expertise. If they want to buy a new phone, they come to you because they think you're an expert in phones. And if you're helped by AI to come up with a better answer for them, they don't really care much. So this is really important also when you pay influencers, to what extent they can use it. So I was asked by Marco Raffaello to come up with some examples that are not Italian, right? We have the two big exceptions here in the room. So some companies that do it right. Number one, Spotify. Spotify has always been a bit of my favorite examples even 15 years ago. Because 15 years ago I said, because AI is much older than Gen AI, as you know. So typically we are very comfortable having AI or recommendation system make a short list of options. And then we want to choose as a human. What you see with music is the opposite. So you indicate some of your preferences, some of your nudges, but you want Spotify to suggest you the next music. And it's because we want to be exposed to new music. And we know that if we're just left to our own devices, we will just, have the same songs over and over again. So Spotify was able to analyze patterns that are really subconscious, what you click on, a little bit like TikTok. And so to come up with, hey, people like you really like these kind of music. And to also connect completely disjunct genres. So you like heavy metal, so maybe you also like classical music and, these weird combinations. Nike. This is a great example of a brand that sometimes gets it wrong, sometimes right? So I use it as a negative example in terms of findability. But they have done two great campaigns, Nike for You and Always Evolving. So with Serena Williams, one of their spokespeople, they had, evolving Serena Williams. And they figured out personalization, which Serena Williams you like more. And they used that in their advertising with great results. And then Zalando on segmentation. So in marketing, I have segmentation go from demographic things, right? Your age, your gender, your race, to psychographics, to behavioral ones online based on what you do. And so AI is very good in quickly picking up changes in behaviors online and then using that one for segmentation and new product development. So my main message here is, yes, AI helps you to execute at scale, but it's the humans that tells you what matters. And if AI helps you to capture that one and to translate it into products and services better, that is really nice. Counterexamples. So 3 companies that have pulled back from AI a bit. The first one is Klarna. So they fired a lot of people in their customer service call centers, and now they're rehiring them. So they were like, look, AI never gets tired. AI never gets upset with you. So if the customer calls, if Karen calls, if we say in America, right, the person that always complains, AI will be always friendly, knows all about the solutions. It turns out that customers like to have a human at some point, right? Air Canada is another classic example from about a year ago. So they had their chatbot without human intervention talk to customers. And the customer says, oh, can I do this, this, and this, and get then my money back if it doesn't work out? And the chatbot said, yes, please go ahead. The customer did it, and Air Canada said, no, you have to pay us money. And the customer sued them, and the judge said, yes, the customer is right. The chatbot is part of your company, you're responsible. And then much more recently, this is from a month ago in the Financial Times, JP Morgan Chase. So I don't know in your organization, in my university, we have wonderful subscriptions to AI, and we're actually encouraged to use them. JP Morgan Chase did the same thing, and now both because of inaccuracy and because you get the real cost of AI going up, you see that they're pulling back from their employees using AI for everything. So these are some examples that you may learn from to avoid. Let's see. Act 3 in my talk is really kind of, from this experience, what you should invest in, what should you really pay attention to, in my view. So 2 main things. Number 1, data infrastructure is still everything. So I love that UPA is having all of this concentration on measurements. I'm a measurement guy myself. My main bread and butter is KPIs, right? If there really are KPIs for you. So I specialize, I'm an engineer. I think about input, throughput, output. So you put marketing in, you get sales or profits out. What should we measure in between? And these are things that are responsive to your marketing actions, so you can move the needle, but that also ultimately translate into sales. And so AI is giving you new KPIs, but you need good data. Garbage in is still garbage out. So most of my consultancy project's time is ensuring that the data is good quality and that you actually measure what matters. And then the modeling is way easier afterwards. Number 2, as I specified, how present is your brand in these answers that large language models gives? How can you increase it? And we're getting better and better in doing that consistency. And then number 3, I love agentic AI. Some companies are promoting it like crazy. So I attended a free seminar in Boston where Google basically trained us for a full day. And yes, you can now have agents checking the work of other agents, and you can put them in sequence and in parallel. And so agentic AI really has the power to automate a lot of stuff that we do, but they still need to have some very clear a priori thinking about what exactly are your tasks and what should you do with it. So one more anecdote from Teresa Barrera. So what she did in her marketing company was to say to everybody, here is all the AI subscriptions, experiment like crazy. In 6 months, come back to me and tell me how your workflow should be designed and improved. 6 months later, everybody experimented it with AI. Did anybody have an answer to her question? How should their workflow be improved? Absolutely not. So it turns out that we don't very often train our employees or our students, by the way, to think in terms of workflow and exactly how should my job be ultimately designed. And then you can see, well, which parts can you delegate to AI, which parts do you have to check, which parts different agents can do. But you have to get your human experts to really think about it. And then, of course, tell them that they won't be fired, because there's an infinite amount of work to do, as we know in marketing, so there's no danger of that one. So what should you maybe pay less attention to? This whole craze about full automation. So AI companies love to do that. OpenAI and Shopping, they're like, oh no, you should regulate us because it's going to take over the world, it's going to be Terminator. And in my cynical view, they're just doing that to increase investments in AI. Because business leaders have this interesting idea that if something is dangerous or maybe even illegal, it must be very effective. And that's not necessarily the case. So this full automation craze, both for politicians and for business leaders, is really overblown. Number two, and you already know that, is platform chasing. Do not depend or bet your company on one platform. And this is both because platforms change the rules overnight. Right? So when I came back to Europe about 15 years ago, Facebook was all the rage. And managers, built Facebook pages of millions of followers, and you were so proud that your brand had all these organic posts and followers. And then Facebook said, oh, we're going to throttle that one. We're only going to show your brand post to 10% of your followers unless you pay us for paid ads. So they changed the rules overnight, and you suddenly had to make very tough decisions, right? Same took, for instance, TikTok in the US. TikTok was almost banned in the US. So if you put all your eggs in one basket and one channel, you're completely dependent on that channel. So try to come up with rules and approaches that work across channels. And then finally, return on investment. I always say there's a time for experimenting and there's a time for demanding good KPIs. And over time, that your people get better predicting what the ROI of a marketing campaign or an AI campaign is going to be. And so I'm typically kind of the boring bean counter guy. I'm sometimes hired by the finance department, sometimes by the marketing department, but I bring them together because I always try to connect the wonderful creative things that you do with what actually matters to the company. And just aligning those metrics and thinking about ROI is really important. So summing this up in my limited time, AI has transformed marketing. We're already able in the last years to do wonderful things that we couldn't do before. And it has really transformed, I would say, the cost side of how fast you can do things and how much you have to spend. It's been wonderful for very small companies that can now achieve a lot of things. But it has not yet transformed what makes really brands matter to customers. And so with your own media and with your earned media, you can have them act together to really imagine what's next and what you can do for your brand. Grazie mille. If you want to learn more, I have a book. This came out in the big data craze. It's called It's Not the Size of the Data, It's How You Use It. And this is really saying, hey, if you don't know how to use the data you already have, you're not going to do good things with big data. And I think the same things for your brands. If you have your house in order, if you have good quality data, you have great people, you have a clear positioning, you know who your customers are, AI can help you leverage that one. But if you're just shooting in the dark, then AI will just make it way easier for you or your people to make even more mistakes. So everything that we know that matters in marketing still matters. Understand your customers, know your business objectives, and work together to really, with your company, deliver the very best possible product or service, with or without AI. Thank you very much.